Okay, so let's look at the muscle paint node. So like I've mentioned multiple times before, the muscle paint node must always come after the muscle properties and muscle constraint properties nodes, because a lot of the attributes that get edited in the muscle paint node are initialized with proper values in these nodes. If the muscle paint is created beforehand, it gets initialized with all of these to 0, which means more work for you and unexpected behavior downstream if you have a 0 mask created when you painted, perhaps you painted the muscle end mask, you didn't realize that the tendon mask was set to 0, and then you have strange behavior. So you can put it before if you're aware of all of those pitfalls and work around them. But if you just want to do the simplest, most correct thing, then put it after these two nodes. Okay, so basically the muscle paint is the same as an attribute paint node. We hit spacebar F, and just with a couple of small specific changes just for muscles. So one of these is that the attributes that you can paint are pre-specified from this list. So you have to choose which ones you have to paint. You can paint multiple in one node, right? So I can say, oh, I want to paint my tendon mask, and I paint my tendon mask, and this is a beautiful tendon mask and it's so accurate. And then I change it to muscle to bone mask, and I go and I tweak that. And then I change my muscle to muscle slide rate, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you can paint you can paint all of these attributes in one node. You can also stack them together in a row. Just bear in mind then that each muscle paint node is going to, because it caches the geometry internally, it's going to use a bit more file space. But you might find that it's just visually easier to split it up so that you do one attribute per node or something like that, or maybe different regions you do with different nodes. That's a matter of preference. Just be aware that it's going to use up more disk space and slow down your loading time of your file. Okay, so that's where you set your attributes. The interface here is basically exactly the same as for the attribute paint node, which if you're not familiar with it, it is, you can follow these as hints basically. So left mouse operation is going to paint your foreground color. So it's painting 1, which is displayed as red in this infrared visualization. If I hold down Shift and left mouse button, it is going to smooth that out. If I scroll my middle mouse wheel, it's going to resize my brush radius. Control Z to undo, Shift to smooth a bit more, scroll middle mouse to resize brush. Now I'm going to show the important difference between paint background and erase. So let's do this on a different attribute. Let's do muscle end mask because that's going to come in with an existing value. Okay, so if I paint, I'm also just going to reset all changes, which will clear everything I painted on that muscle to muscle slide rate because it was just nonsense values. So, but just be aware of that resetting all changes is going to do it for any of the attributes you've painted in this node. It won't do it if you've done it in a different node, which is why it can be helpful to split them up. But if you can't use reset all changes on your muscle ends and not expect it to affect any of the others that you painted on the same node. Okay, so here I'm painting my foreground color. Now, if I try to control middle mouse button here to erase, you see it will erase what I've painted, but it doesn't erase the incoming attribute value that it had before I started. Okay, so I'm painting, I'm erasing, and it brings back the starting value. Okay, and also while I'm here, let me just show that I can actually tweak my muscle ends mask. So let me paint here. If I tweak my muscle ends mask, and let me pin that so that I can change you see how it updates everything that's under this mask, but it will still do what I painted over. But now If I say Control and left mouse button, now I'm no longer erasing, I'm now painting the value 0 over this. So now I could go, if I painted 0 in this whole region, I could tweak this and it won't change it until I've basically got it so big that it's going to stick out from under that painted region, right? So that's just something to bear in mind. So the Control left mouse is painting the background color, which in this case is 0. I could set it to another value, and I'm holding down Control, and now it's painting that value. Now I'm not holding Control, I'm just left mouse clicking it, and that is doing the foreground value again. So I'm going to Control middle mouse click to restore the background float value. And then just to clarify, the middle mouse button is going to sample as an eyedropper wherever you're clicking. So I have sometimes done this where I don't understand why my value when I'm painting is no longer 1. And it's if you accidentally click the middle mouse button. And if you shift middle mouse button, it will sample it to the background value instead. Okay. So that is basically all you need to know about this. The opacity, I hope, is self-explanatory. You can build up your value. The soft edge, when it's set to 1, it will give a nice soft fall off. Let's set this back to 1. It will give a nice soft fall off. If I set it to 0, it will just be quite harsh. Then these opacity pressure and radius pressure are related to if you're using a tablet and pen. I don't use it often enough to really know the exact settings, but it should be the same as with the attribute paint. Now, the connected only is going to, this is very useful. I recommend always turning this on. Okay, and it might not immediately be obvious why it's helpful, but I'll show you. So if I am painting here, you'll see that it's not, with this off, if I paint here, it's going to spill over. Just reset all my changes. If I have this on, it will be quite good. But you see, I accidentally then slipped and now it's painting on the other one, which I don't want. But we can do something to fix that. If we put down a visibility node, we set it to non-selected primitives. When we select here, we just want to use 9 to group select and then muscle ID. So I'm going to select this muscle. Now it will hide all the other muscles. They're all still there. You'll see that the point count doesn't change. Let me just pin this. You see the point count isn't changing. It's just creating these groups called, this primitive group called 3D hidden primitives, which Houdini knows to not render. Okay, so I've hidden my other points. And now when I paint with connected only on, I can be as messy as I like. You see, so I'm clicking here. Okay, I'm stroking. When I toggle this off again, you see that none of the other muscles were affected. However, let me just reset all changes. If I uncheck connected only, so if I have the default settings and I do the same thing that I was just doing, like that, and I bypass the visibility again, you see it didn't respect the muscle I was painting just because of the visibility. So I suggest always having connected only on. The visible only actually isn't to do with this visibility. It's to do with what muscles are in front of the other. So if I do this and I try to paint on this trapezius, even if I have the visibility set, let's just reset all changes. But if I try to paint here, you see it's not really netting me. And that's because of all the muscles that are in front of it. It's able to see them. It's not painting on them, but it's using them as a sort of occlusion mask and not letting me paint on those muscles at the back. So now I can't paint except for where it's exposed, and then now I can paint. So to be honest, I don't think this is particularly useful, but you never know. And the front face only, I would also be wary of using, because we have to remember we're dealing with tetrahedra here. So we're not just painting on the surface, we're actually painting the whole volume. So if I have front face only on and I paint here, it won't affect the other side, but what is it even doing to the tetrahedron on the inside? So I would also be aware of that. Okay. This you don't need to worry about. Symmetry, you can turn on if you want. I would suggest probably still waiting till after the muscle pain to mirror. But if you have asymmetric-ish muscles, you might get results with this. But then, of course, if they're not fully symmetric, you might get strange behavior, but you can if you want to. Okay, now for the recache tab. This is both very useful and very frustrating because it doesn't always work. Basically, what it is designed to do. So let me paint something. I'll just paint like an X so that's nice and obvious what I did. Now let's say I changed my muscle solidify settings. Like these two are slightly different, so I'll just change that. Now, because the solidify settings have changed, it's going to completely change the point count and point order. So now the muscle paint will be scrambled. And this is whether I have my visibility on or not. It doesn't make a difference. It's going to scramble it because the point count changed. So if I do recache strokes, that should fix it. And it often does. So this is your first point of call if you get that scrambled option. However, there are some situations where it doesn't work. Often it won't be consistent between different Houdini versions for some reason. So if you've like versioned up from one Houdini to another, even just subversion sometimes can be a bit inconsistent. Sometimes it could just be something like inside the muscle solidify has changed a bit. Also, if you've painted them in one position and then tried to recache them in another position, it's going to break. So here's a case in point. If I put down an exploded view, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. I'm going to change this to muscle ID. Change this to bounding box center. Just that gives a better result for what I want to show later. Right now, that's still great. Everything peachy. Now I'm going to change my point order. It's going to be scrambled. And now if I recache the strokes, you see it hasn't been able to recache it. Let me just do Control Z. However, if I turn off exploded view, recache strokes, it's fine. But it's not the exploded view per se that's breaking it. It's the fact that I painted it in the non-exploded view and then tried to recache it in the exploded view. So if conversely, I put on an exploded view, I reset all the changes, and now I paint an X again. Whoops. More of a V, but anyway. If I now change my input, it scrambles it. If I recache the strokes with the exploded view still on, it's completely fine. If I turn the exploded view off and recache the strokes, it will break it. Okay? So if you want to use the exploded view, which I recommend doing, it's very helpful actually to paint with the exploded view on. I recommend putting it down before you do any muscle painting. So make sure you don't have any changes when you put down your exploded view. Also make sure that you're not changing your uniform scale value or your centroid method between painting, right? So any changes you make to this, you need to stick with them for once you've started painting. Okay, so let's say I want to use my exploded view, and you can use it in conjunction with the visibility node. So the visibility node basically is fine to bypass on and off. The exploded view, you don't want to bypass on and off, right? Because it's going to mess with your recache. So keep your exploded view. If you want to then get back to your original position, you can use an extract T-pose over there, which is now, because our muscle solidify creates a T-pose for us, we can just extract the position and it will restore it. So rather do that than bypass it once you're done painting, because then you might forget to put it back on when you want to recache. Okay. This brings me to an important point. Because there is a bit of a pain, basically, with the muscle paint in terms of changing if the point count changes, changing if the model changes. So I actually forgot that I wanted to show. I have a sculpt node here where I just changed the shape of the muscle. Whoops. Right. So if I I'll just show how that, you see how all the points change. So because those change, the muscle paint will also be scrambled if you have any model changes that come in. But anyway, because we have this thing where the muscle paint is very sensitive to any changes upstream, not literally any changes, but many changes upstream, I strongly recommend holding off on doing muscle painting for as long as possible. For instance, you might come in and see, oh, these muscle ends are wrong. I actually need the muscle ends to come like this. I can tell that before I've run any simulation. However, if you haven't yet got your general settings for most of your muscles down to a good value, and you might still be doing model changes, and you might still be changing your muscle solidify values, etc., I would suggest not doing any muscle painting yet. Even painting that you can anticipate that you're going to need later on, don't do it yet, because if there are upstream changes later, you're going to have to make sure that your muscle paint updates properly and recaches strokes properly. So rather hold off on any painting until after you have refined your general settings. And this I recommend doing in general. You're not going to simulate your whole character with your first settings, right? You want to make sure that the settings are good, and you don't need to do that on everything. It's much faster and easier to just put down a blast and, let's say, specify these muscles on the leg. I want to say delete non-selected, and just to simulate those, okay? Especially because the leg muscles are good, partly because they're a bit more cylindrical. They're not going to need as many custom masks painted, and they are nice, strong muscles that bulge, so it's good for tweaking all sorts of flex settings and making sure that you have good density and your general settings here are all nice. So I would suggest doing this, refining that. Once you're happy with that, you can maybe add a few more muscles. And only once you've done, say, most of the muscles and you've done as much as you can without making any of these custom edits with the muscle paint, only then start making muscle paint changes and do it as sparingly as possible. Obviously, there are some things that you're just going to have to do. For instance, this type of muscle, unless you do it in some procedural way, which one can do, it's just a bit more complicated, but you'd want to paint it, right? But wait, rather do a couple of sims where it's wrong and make sure that you're getting some general things that you're happy with, then paint those. Okay. Along the lines of minimizing how much you paint, I have one tip that I suggest. Let me get rid of that blast. So let's say I've painted I don't like doing it on the muscle ends. Let's rather reset all changes and do it on the tendon mask. Right. So I've done what I suggested. I tested everything. I simmed the legs. I'm happy with where I am, and now I'm ready to start working on these more unusual muscles. So I'm going to paint in my my tendon mask. This is just me clicking with my left mouse button. Now I'm going to smooth, holding down Shift. I'm going to hold down Control to paint my background value, not erase, but paint background value. Oh, wrong button. Okay. Great. Now, I don't want to paint the end mask when it's going to be basically exactly the same as the tendon mask, just a bit smaller. So what I can do is I can use an attribute remap. I can specify my original name as the tendon mask, my new name as the muscle end mask, and then I can turn this on to display it. And I need to actually hit the display button there. So it is displaying it. And right now it means that the muscle end mask is going to be exactly the same as the tendon mask. However, I can tweak these. So I'm going to pull this across to shrink it basically. And if I toggle this on and off, I'm kind of using the other ends as a guide to see if I've remapped it correctly. I think I had pretty big values here. I think these are going to be more along. Let me just reset those to default. Now it's going to be a bit more like that, right? And maybe, so just a little tip, if you hold down shift, select all, you can select as many points as there are, change your interpolation to B-spline. I like doing this so that I can have a bit of a softer shape. Okay. And you can always put another muscle paint after this if you want to tweak that, but this can give you a good first starting point. So that's a little tip if you want to get your muscle end mask from your tendon mask. Let me just clarify that this is going to overwrite any existing values of your muscle end mask. If you wanted to only do it for certain muscles, you can specify the muscles in the group. I'm going to press 9 for group mode, and I can choose muscle ID here. So I will select that one, and I haven't painted it yet, but let's say that one, right? And then I can go ahead and paint this one too. Something like this. That is not what I wanted to do. Control Z. Let me use my visibility to have more control. Okay. Control left mouse to paint over that. And then maybe if I wanted that, I can control middle mouse to bring something back, but I don't actually. And now the attribute remap will make it a bit smaller. So now we've got our tendon mask and our muscle end mask. I mentioned what the muscle to bone mask does in the muscle constraint properties video about muscle to bones. I've done the muscle end and tendon masks. Muscle glue is something that I'm going to address in a separate video. It's a bit more of an advanced topic. Not really, but it's not part of the standard necessary workflow, shall I say. The muscle to muscle slide rate and the muscle to bone slide rate will be created. The starting values will be created in your muscle constraint properties. So if we look at my muscle to bone here, I've set the slide rate of 0.5, and let's say the muscle to muscle, I'll set 0.755. So now in the muscle paint, if I go to muscle slide rate, you'll see it's this yellow value corresponding to, and now is a great time to use my eyedropper. So you can see that's the value that it's got. So maybe I want to say, oh, I want to have a muscle to muscle slide value of 1 just in this region, but I don't want to let it slide at all when it is in this region. Same for muscle to bone. If you want to, so you can set per muscle values here, obviously, but if you wanted to do it here, you can use the fill option. And if connected only is on, you can say, let's fill that muscle. But if connected only isn't on, it's going to fill everything. So just be aware of that. I'll go back to volume. I wouldn't recommend using surface or screen or nearest point because we want to work with volumes because of the tetrahedra. So either use volume or fill. But now I can maybe say, oh, well, there, I want it a bit different. Okay. One last point that I will make. This is kind of an advanced topic, but also something that's common enough that I think it's worth mentioning here. Like I said, there are situations where the recache strokes will not work at all. Okay. And what do you do to save the work you've already done? Basically, you can either, as you're working, you can save it out, either with a stash or a file cache node. I'll just use a stash because it's quick and easy. But here I have stashed out the value of, the current data coming in. So it's going to have all the painted attributes that I painted upstream. So I can either cache this out so that if it ever breaks later, I have this ready to use. Or if I forgot to do that and I'm now in a situation where it's broken, basically you might have to figure out why it broke. If it broke because you changed the muscle solidify values or because of a model change, you'll want to open up a previous Houdini file where before it changed. Or if it changed because you switched from one Houdini version to another, you want to figure out what that difference was. If you want to check what version a file was saved with, if you go to Edit, Aliases and Variables, and you go to this Variables tab, you'll see it says HIP save version. So that is the last time the file was saved, what version of Houdini was used. So if you open up an old file and you see that the version is different to the version that you're currently in, relaunch Houdini in that old version, open the file, and then what you can do is stash in that file, or if it's in an older file, stash in the older file, whatever. And then what's nice is if you have two different Houdinis open at the same time, you can Control C in the one and then navigate to the other one and Control V. So you can copy a stashed node from an old file, or if you prefer to use a file cache, you can do the same thing. But basically, save out the old values, read them back in, and now I have this little subnet that I made here. You'll see this is a different, I think this will be a different point count to that. But basically, what I have in here is it's going to take, so this is the new geometry that doesn't have the painted stuff. This is the old geometry with the painted stuff on. I just have an extract centroid here. This is assuming that there was an exploded view, but it's also going to help a little bit for more accurate transfer if you have it exploded, so that there aren't points close together on different muscles that get matching transfers. Extract centroid on the rest, use transform pieces, then you will get an exact match of your new pieces to your old pieces. Then there's a ray here with transform points off, minimum distance method, import attributes from hits, and here you specify whichever attributes you want to transfer. And then this is just to set it back to the T-pose. So now this ray is, you could also use an attribute transfer. The ray is going to help a bit more for if you have a mismatch in resolution between the two different geometries. It will help, it will get the value from this part of the face instead of trying to get from the closest point. And then that way you can, let's see what I actually have here. I did the muscle end mask. So if I display muscle end mask, you see that is what I had before, and there it's transferred to the new geometry. So you can grab this from the example file if you need that. So basically, in this case, I could do that. Did I even paint anything here? What did I paint? Muscle to bone slide rate. Did I paint my muscle tendon mask? Yeah. So did I even stash this? Yes. Did I transfer my tendon mask? No. Okay, in the next video, we will look at muscle mirror.